All right, hey everyone, welcome back. It is another episode of our coffee talks with me and David. So, David, how has your week been?
Dan, I appreciate you asking me that every single episode, but I really know you don't care, my friend. It's just a nice thing to say, so I'm really not going to bother answering. Let's move right
There
on.
we go. It's a nice way to start the episode. Maybe the people want to know.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
I appreciate the fact that they would want to know, but this week has been so busy that I don't really want to comment on that. Let's let the people decide after I get done with my raving and ranting.
fair enough. Well, before you start raving and ranting, let's go through the comments from last week's episode, and then you can get right into it. Starting off with NP Pokemon said, thanks to the episode once again. When you talked about Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield killing set collecting, that was me, no doubt. Yeah, we talked quite a lot about that last week, about how people just weren't set collecting for the longest time just because of how difficult it was. They do say, do you think people will burn out on the gallery cards really quickly? So, like the trainer gallery and then the illustration res, stuff like that. I want to say no. I don't think people will burn out on those in the same way that they did with things like, the rainbow rares, where I think towards the end of it, people, almost everyone was just sick of rainbow rares. But the gallery cards, those trainer gallery cards and the illustration rares, all of them look different. When it was rainbow rares, you were getting 30 new cards a set that all kind of looked the same. The illustration rares, even just one to the next, they all look completely different. There's a lot of different art styles. There's a lot of different people involved doing a lot of different things. And I think it's, if you look at a couple of illustration rares or a couple of trainer gallery cards and you think, well, I don't like these ones, there's something completely different right next to it. And the next set is not just going to be full of more of the same thing that you don't like. So I think these are going to be a welcome addition for a long time to come. I don't think people are going to get sick of these. Anything further to add, Dave, or just nodding along?
No, I'm nodding along because
Okay.
I really do understand the whole concept of, chase cards, number one, a
Yeah.
rainbow rare. Is it really, again, is it someone looking for a certain character card? If people aren't collecting the sets anyways, all of them, then they're really going to go for individual cards. A lot of them of the characters they're looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, I really think that at this point, you're either kind of one or the other. You're the whole set collector, or you're just inside the set looking for very specific things that interest you.
Yeah. And hopefully we get more people back into the whole set collecting now that it's not needing hundreds of cases. Next comment is from Tanda Warner. Said, interesting about your stores not taking returns. None of the stores in Australia allow returns of any card game product because of people resealing packs and stuff for a long time. So, talked a bit about that one last week. More places are starting to do that now. Next, we have Professor Birch. I would love to know from both of you what your favorite TCG set of all time is and why. Do you have an answer on this one, David?
Someone's asked me before, but I really don't. I have never really spent that much time immersed in all of the sets to compare. I think that the one that in of the modern era, the one that I really like is Hidden Fates,
That's
just
a very good
because
set.
of
Yeah.
how detailed and how varied it is, and the galleries or whatever else is in it that you call
Yeah.
them. So there's just so much to really absorb in that set, and it's a challenge to put together. So I really like that one.
That is a really good one. I'm a big fan of the HGSS era overall. But for individual sets, Majestic Dawn from the Diamond and Pearl era, I'm a big fan of that one. Delta Species is always a great set. A lot of the EX era, where they had a lot of themes running through sets, were really nice. Recent stuff
Dan,
as
the
well.
comment was Dan. The comment was one card set. We don't need you to restate all of them. We know you love Pokemon, Dan. Let's just get to the next comment.
One card set. All right. Well, there's some that we got anyway. All right. Next card set. We got not next card set. Why am I saying next card set? Next comment got me backwards. Lamar Kisa, who's commented on a few so far, said, I almost always go by eBay last sold or current eBay listings, as I believe eBay prices drive the price of most cards, which, yeah, I think is fair. A lot of people will look to eBay when pricing cards, and for high end items, I think it's fair to pay close to market price. Yeah, we did talk a lot more about this last week about how to determine market price and stuff on cards, so we'll not go too much into it again. Lamar also adds, even if it comes down to just me watching, I will thoroughly enjoy listening to these coffee talks. So we will always have at least one viewer we talked about our downward trajectory. We're always going to be at least one viewer every week.
Yeah, that just makes me appreciate Lamar all the more. And thank you, Lamar. And Lamar, tell one friend so that they can tell a friend about this silly, dumb, authentic, self-deprecating stuff we're doing here. And maybe we'll at least keep us to double digits going forward. That'd be great.
There we go. Or tell two friends and get them to tell two friends each, and we'll just pyramid scheme
You
over
know,
the big
I
viewers.
hate when you throw the complicated math at me, Dan. I just doing the basic stuff. Go slow with me.
Yeah, there we go. Rainbow Jim commented again, saying thanks for clearing up everything we cleared up about her last week, and mentioned the E-Series card that you had, the filler card that had, it was the filler water energy. Again, we saw it last week. She said that she would store it behind the energy cards of Expedition, and she also mentioned that the E-Series boosters didn't come with energy cards, and only the theme decks actually had them, even though Expedition, the set, has them numbered. She said they only actually came from the energy cards, from the theme deck, sorry, for energy cards. I haven't personally opened any Expedition, so I wasn't aware of that, so that's also good to know. But I guess even if the energy cards themselves weren't in boosters, they may still have just used that design for the filler card for boosters, so they could have come from theme decks, or it could have come from boosters. She also says the Advent Calendar that we talked about is a great product. Only downside is it does take up a lot of storage space, which I definitely agree with. For a product, if you're buying quite a few of them to store for investment, there is quite a lot of space taken up with those.
Oh, so that's interesting. I didn't actually clarify that, but I actually meant that I was just when I bought them for investment, I was not actually buying the full calendars in the
Oh, you
boxes. I was just buying the
buying the
card
promos?
sets because I don't
I
think that
see.
the interest will necessarily be in the sealed product as much as the other
Okay.
one. Plus, it's a lot more expensive for the sealed product if you're
Yeah.
just going for the sets. I think the message of Rainbow Jim here is that you and I really are not anywhere near as smart as she is, and at this point, you may want to consider an additional podcast or just kicking me right off and bringing her right in. Just something to think about, Dan.
I'll definitely make a note of that. We'll consider that for the future.
Okay.
We'll get your stories out of you, what you can remember, and then we'll see where we go from there.
I think that's nice. That's exactly what people do when they're using other people, Dan. Great idea.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I have learned from some of the best in Pokemon. The way to be successful in Pokemon is you have no friends, you just use people, and then once they're done, once they're no longer useful, you kick them to the curb. But that's how all of these successful people in Pokemon have been and continue to be to this day.
Well, let me do an encore with a golf clap, okay? I'm going to
There
give
we
you
go.
a golf clap on that one. Very nice. Very
Yeah.
nice.
All right, moving very swiftly on. Laura, my wife, commented on the last one. Finally, I don't know why she's not commenting every week, but she finally commented to say, thanks for the shout out. I do what I can on the graphics front, and it's definitely interesting seeing so many of her cards on these videos, and maybe if the series gets really popular, Dan will eventually be able to afford nice things too, which would be nice. It would be nice if I could afford some nice things as well.
Yes, like you said, firmly in second place. So thank you for Laura for reiterating that. That's wonderful.
I said I'd be firmly in second place if I didn't have the trophies. I've still got the trophies.
I
For,
know, but I
for
think
now,
you were fooling yourself at that moment, Dan. That's fine.
until we run out of money and we need to pay the mortgage and I have to sell. But for now, we're fine. All right, so that was all the comments from last week. So Dave, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this episode. Just start. Tell me about the first thing you want to tell me about, and we'll go from there.
Well, Dan, I think the first thing you need to know is why is it so dark in the room that I'm in? I have tucked myself veritably away from the family because the day that we are filming is, of course, Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be very straight with your viewers, Dan. I'm hiding right now. My entire family is around, and my wife made it clear to me that Mother's Day was very important to her, despite me saying, you're not my mother. I said, you're not my mother, but she said right back in my face, but I'm the mother of your children. I didn't have a great comeback, Dan, but I did decide to try to do this covertly.
Yeah.
So I'm hiding in a bedroom. I'm sorry for the dark tones. I want you to know how I know when it is a certain holiday of any kind. It's because my wife tones up a little bit. She's like, all of a sudden, there's a bit more edginess. And she wants to know, do I really appreciate her? That's really what it comes down to, Dan. So just remember this if you ever decide to have kids, know anyone that has kids, want to call your mom or something like this. Last night, about 3 a.m, after a long night of partying, she basically said to me, what is going on with the toilet paper roll? This is 3 a.m, Dan, laying in bed. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, every single time I go in there, the toilet paper roll is turned around. do you take the toilet paper roll off and turn it around? And I hesitated, and she said, you're hesitating, so I know you do. And I said, fine, you got me, I do. And she said, why would you do that? And I said, just to screw with you. And so she said, but it shouldn't go that way. Well, let me, if that's going to be what's coming up, the toilet paper roll, you know that Mother's Day is here. All right. And so that was followed by me apologizing profusely and say, look, I need to make you understand how much I love you, and I will not fiddle with the toilet paper roll anymore. You deserve better. And but at the same time, she then started to say what made her happy in life was tremendous wealth. At which time, because she could use it for the things she afforded, at which time I explained that, I had to apologize for all my recent Pokemon spending, and agreed to make this our topic in therapy this coming week. So it's been yeah, it's Mother's Day, Dan. Let me just put it out there. So
Yeah.
on Tuesday, when this video issues, if you're still alive, people will have gone past that. But happy Mother's Day to everyone out there, all the 28-year-old boys that are watching, men that are watching. And that's how I know it's Mother's Day, and I'm hiding in a room, and we better go very fast into this video.
I spent that entire time just waiting for some terrible Pokemon puns. I,
Yes, no,
I, I
no.
was convinced that story was just going to be another into some terrible puns that we had to find card images for. But it turned out
No,
to be
you
a
got
real story.
But I did send you a couple of pictures of toilet paper rolls and how up or down. So that
Okay.
way, if you want to put them on, people are, you know what? Please comment. No one will
Anyway,
comment on anything. You know
yeah,
what,
no,
Lamar, comment on toilet paper and which way you like it to roll, so I know why. Okay.
hang on. If no one will tell us their favorite Pokemon cards, tell us which way around you like your toilet roll.
Yes, because that way we know. All right, good.
Yeah,
Dan, thank you for listening. Like I said, that's why it's a little dark. But let's move on. I
yeah,
want to tell you about some interesting things that happened this week.
cool.
Um, if people aren't watching your whole series, Dan, that's a huge mistake. I mean, I don't want to call them losers because they're all winners, Dan, in my book, but I just think they're losing out on something if they're not following the trajectory of this rapidly de escalating, wonderful conversation thing that we're doing. So, if they were to go back a couple of episodes, they would understand that there was an auction for Tyler the Great, a Yu Gi Oh card that ended up selling for something like $311,000. And my role in it was to bring it up because somebody had approached me who wanted to buy the card and said, hey, I could use some money. I'd like to raise capital through you if you might be interested in buying some of my cards. And that was an opportunity that got stymied a bit by our definitions or lack thereof of commonality with respect to market value, as we know. But I was able to secure that deal this week. And so that way he can have the money and still get that card purchased. And what I bought, Dan, I think people will find this a little bit surprising, is I actually bought Topps Chrome cards. Now, what
Yeah,
are Chrome cards? What are Topps Chrome cards? What do people realize about these? We can talk a little bit about that, but
yeah,
basically, they were cards that were issued in that early 99 or 2000 time frame. They really didn't get issued going forward past that time frame, which makes them ultimately, as
yeah,
far as continuation, more than 20 years old. And they're extremely rare with respect, and I'm talking specifically Topps Chrome cards,
yeah, definitely.
with respect to, as well as Topps cards in general are very rare. But if you were to try to find a Top Series 1 Chrome box, there's one on eBay right now, a single one that's sealed for $17,800. And there are no Series 2 out there at all at this time. Those are very, very, very rare. Well, each of the Chrome cards themselves, 151 total combined between the Series 1 and 2
Yep.
box packs, came in three different variants of Chromes: Spectras, Sparkles, and Technochromes. And so this was
Plus
an
the
opportunity.
plus the
Yes, plus,
standard version. Yeah, there was the
plus the
three different
standard
chase
version,
versions,
absolutely.
plus the standard version.
That's correct. So there was actually four different variants of these. And I thought for not only were they pretty neat and interesting, but for an investment standpoint, I thought that assuming, and that is an assumption, that the Pokemon franchise continues to proliferate successfully over the next years, and a lot of people feel we're just in the infancy from a collecting standpoint, that these Chrome cards in particular, as well as a bunch of other stuff that I bought in rainbow and silver foils, would be potentially a very tremendous investment going forward.
I think they definitely can be. Yeah. So there was a time where, when Pokemon was not at its peak, we're talking like late Gen 3, early Gen 4, after the transition from Wizards of the Coast to Nintendo, Topps cards were basically worthless. Like no one wanted Topps. Like even the Topps Chrome was almost worth nothing. Topps did continue putting out regular sets for a little while up to Gen 3. I think they got one Gen 3 set in, so there's a few Gen 2 sets and stuff as well, but only Chrome of the very first generation, the two Chrome sets. And Chrome actually paid for our trip to Worlds last year because during the time where they were worth nothing, Laura was at a store and they had a load of packs of Series 1 and Series 2 of Chrome, and she got, I think, 9 packs of each. And I think she came out spending less than $20 on the whole thing.
Wow.
And then last year we sold, I think, 7 packs of Series 1 and 7 packs of Series 2. And we arranged with another collector, and our price was $900 for a 1 and a 2 together. And he bought 7 of each off us. And so that completely paid for our trip to Worlds because it's not something that we were ever thinking about collecting. And I think we thought if we were ever going to collect, we definitely wouldn't do it by opening these loose packs. But this collector was really, really into doing breaks and stuff. He opened a lot of them on his social media, so he bought a ton of them from us. And it was just unbelievable to see how much these cards had gone up. And I guess a quick thing for people who don't know really what the Topps cards are, they're not part of the trading card game. There's no game associated with them. It's entirely just art. And through the regular top sets, there'd be some Pokemon, plus there would be some, screen caps from episodes of the show. The main sets, the chase cards, were like die cut cards. There would be foil parallel sets of the main sets too, but there'd be die cut cards, evolution cards, things like that. With the Chrome series, it was just the Pokemon. Across the two sets, it was all 151 Pokemon from the first generation. So that is why the Chrome, I think, is another one that people really, really go after because it is just all of the Pokemon. There's nothing else you're going to be pulling from packs. No episodes, no nothing like that. Just solid Pokemon, and people really like that. And the chase cards, the different levels of rarity on what was it, Spectra, Sparkle, and Techno, has a lot of people chasing it.
Yeah, and the Spectra. So let's describe for people, just because it was an entire education for me, and I found it
Yeah,
really interesting, almost mesmerizing. So the Spectra packs, I'm sorry, the Spectra cards. There's one of them basically in every 2 packs is where
yeah,
you'll typically get them. But the Sparkle cards are coming one in every 10 packs or
yeah,
so, and the Techno cards are coming only one in every 15 packs or so. So you're looking at roughly 2 per box, at which time you're then thinking there's 151 different cards you have to obtain or could obtain, and we can't account on top of that for any duplication.
yeah,
So you're going to see that some of these cards are selling in the 20, 30, $40,000 range, just because, especially if you account for the rarity just in general, and then you apply to that this notion of condition, which for these cards, which are very crisp, square cut corners,
yeah.
edges that go all the way out, no rounding. It's really a challenge to try to go out and find these cards and complete a set, especially in great condition.
Yeah, Topps cards as well also have a thing where if they've been sealed in their packs for a long time, if you're opening sealed packs, a lot of the times the cards will have just stuck together and you have to
Yes.
very, very carefully peel them apart. Now, with the base set cards in the normal sets, that's a bit easier, but with the foil ones, if you just do it slightly too hard or you bend it slightly, you're going to get creases, you're going to get cracks in the foil, it's going to damage the foil a lot easier. So you have a lot of different issues that you're coming up against for getting these.
So I know we're going to show some of the cards
Yeah,
that I got. I sent you pictures. I'm just going to read off kind of a list, a few of them, because I wanted to lead to a little different discussion that I think is important to have as well. So you can tell me how to do this, but the first one that I sent was a Sparkle Chrome Gengar in a
yep,
PSA 10, and the again, the Sparkle Chrome being the second most rare type of card to come upon in the packs when you're selecting.
yeah,
Another one that I sent was a Techno Chrome Gyarados, which was a CGC 9.5. this card looks really beautiful. Just it happens to be with the CGC case, just because the blue color, along with the blue colors of the Gyarados, really is kind of cool. Then I sent a Sparkle Chrome Gengar in a Tag 9, and we're going to talk about Tag in a minute.
Yeah.
But let me continue on just with the cards for a second. So I sent a Spectrochrome Charizard. That's the third most rare, again, just for reiteration, in a Tag 10. And a Technochrome Pikachu in a Tag 9. Technochrome Blastoise in a Tag 9. And a Sparkle Chrome Venusaur in a Tag 9. So I know you'll be showing all of those.
Yeah.
And I know that now people are saying, so what's the deal with a couple of questions I'm sure they'd have. What is tag? And also, well, these are all graded, David. You know, you don't typically buy graded stuff. So let's transition for a second into grading, because this is always an interesting debate about things.
Yeah.
Number one, while I don't search for graded stuff and I don't grade my own cards, I certainly buy graded stuff when it's the only thing that's available to me, and it's something that I want. So in this case, these cards, which I think will end up being tremendously valuable down the road, and I bought as much for investment in this particular instance as for collecting, although some of these were complete sets in the rainbow and silver foils and that kind of thing. So Dan, I thought I would talk just a second about this new company that's coming out on the horizon called TAG and Tag Grading. I should say first that I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I should say second that what they're doing is an idea that I was contemplating a couple of years ago. Put a lot of effort and inertia into trying to figure out how to do what they're doing, but didn't have the necessary technological resources to do it. And they're doing it.
Yeah.
They are a huge player. They've got huge people from grading companies and from technology companies, and they're basically using artificial intelligence and machines, specifically machines, to analyze every detail of a card and rate it on a 1,000 point scale. And so you don't get necessarily a 9 or 10, or you do, but you get a 966 out of 1,000, and folks
Yeah.
can look at those scans back on the computer that we just put up, and it tells you. So that's a 10, and a 941 unfortunately is a 9, but you really are down in the weeds as far as the details with respect to corners and edges and surface area and every minute little defect, print lines, with a consistent model for grading cards. They're not ready to do regular Pokemon TCG Wizards of the Coast type cards because of the rounded edges just yet.
Okay.
They're focused in coming out of the sports card world where edges are square. I should say corners are square.
Yeah.
But this is what I have argued about for all of the years, why I have not graded my cards. I've not graded my cards because you can grade your cards, as you well know, and we've talked about before, and on one day you'll get an 8, the next day you'll get a 9, the next day you'll get a 10. When I'm on the Facebook groups and I'm talking about somebody or I'm reading about somebody, I'm tired, Dan. 3 o'clock in the morning to your early video casts are killing me. So I'm muttering around like crazy. Just bear with me. But when I read these things and somebody says, "Oh, I got this most beautiful silver textured card and it graded a 9. I think a resubmit will get me a 10, or it graded an 8.5." This whole resubmission stuff is ridiculous. Okay. And let me just go further, Dan, because I am done. I'm going to rant right on through right now.
There we
When
go.
you tell me you don't care if yours is really a 10 because you just want it to say 10 and you want it to look like a 10, well, Dan, if it looks like 10 and it smells like a 10, it may just not be a 10, Dan. So, but it's okay. That we all to their own, each to their own. But what I'm going to tell you is it's completely subjective, 100%. And you can look at the cards when you let an individual do it for 23 seconds under a light. And I have interviewed myriad of grading folks who've worked at all of the companies, and they've told me exactly that. So when you look at new technology, my question to you, Dan, I'm all behind it. I think it's going to be the new
Yeah.
rage. I don't know if it's this company or someone beats them to it, but they seem to have a leg up right now. Let me tell you what they do. Not only do they rate all of that, not only do they scan the card when it comes in, then scan it after when it's put in the case, front and back. Then it's a see-through case, so there's no stickers or anything. It's actually etched all of the details. They can look on the pictures into the case. It's never touched by human hands, the cards whatsoever in the entire process. It's all machine touched and the rest of it. It's deionized as far as dust and all the rest of it when it goes in. And then when it's all said and done, you have a QR code that allows you to go to what looks like, if any of you gentlemen out there or who have bought, typically it's the man buying for the woman, some kind of gemstone ring. That doesn't have to happen, gals. Please buy something for your man. We love stuff too. But there's these gemstone reports that talk about clarity and color and Christmas and all this stuff. This is what these reports look like, to where you can actually blow up the imagery into the back and front and see what the defects are. And you then not only get all of that information, but you can then download that right into eBay should you be someone that wants to sell it. The pictures, the QR code links, all of it. It's just phenomenal. And it's accurate. Now, let me tell you something. When I get a 941 Pikachu, I'm not happy. Want to know why I'm not happy, Dan? You know why I'm not happy. Because I didn't get a 945 or 950 that would have gave me a 10. And I don't use 9.5s because it's ambiguous. So here's the deal. I don't care because I have to abide by the objectiveness of the review. That's what it is. So I'm okay with a 941 being a 9, and I'm okay with the fact that they're more harsh when it comes to centering. They don't give you a 60-40 allowance. They only give you a 55-45. But it is remarkable technology that I think the world, and the card world especially, is going to regret not understanding. If you continue to grade your cards right now, that's all going to be old at some point when people say, we know about the resubmissions, we know how many times the Logan Paul card was resubmitted and all those other stories. And we want something that really accurately reflects true grades on our cards.
Yeah, so I think the newer a grading company is for the more reputable companies, you can definitely see them integrating more technology into it. Like, I mean, if you just look at the difference between, say, CGC, who are relatively new to trading cards, compared to like Beckett and PSA, CGC have a lot more technology. Like they've got some of their reports on, I think it was when they did the prototype Blastoise, the Blastoise with the magic back, and it's in Comic Sans. It was like a Wizard's test print. They did a lot of technological scans which showed you like the different layers of the card. And there was a time where someone had a non-hollow base set 2 Charizard, and they went through, and some people had said they thought it was fake because it was thinner. It felt thinner or bendier than a regular base set 2 Charizard, and they did something to find out that it was missing a print layer. So they have some more technology available. I don't think they have as much as this tag one does. Obviously they're not going into the 1,000-point scales. I think grading is definitely moving in the right direction technology wise. The less subjectiveness that you can get in grading, the better. Obviously, you want to make sure that what you're getting is definitive. With this, if you submit a card, crack it and resubmit it, for it to come back with the exact same points out of 1,000 is really what it should be. I mean, obviously, if you crack a card, you might damage it, whatever, but that's really where you should be looking. You should be trying to remove the human element from grading completely. But I also think there are a lot of people in Pokemon don't want that. Collectors don't want this crazy breakdown because they like the idea of their card being perfect. So people chase these PSA 10s, they chase the Beckett Black Label because it's like, oh, this is the pinnacle of this company, this is everything. And CGC, if you get all 10s in all 4 of your subgrades, it's called a perfect. But if you compare it to older collectibles that have been graded for a long time, if we look at comic books, if you look at coins, they're never perfect. I mean, comic books, I think, are graded on a point scale out of 10, and it's unbelievably rare to ever get a 9.8. I don't know if I've ever seen a 10.0 comic with any of these grading companies. And then, when people are grading coins or they're grading bills for money collectors, it's graded out of 100, but it's like the 70s and 80s is where almost everything is done. And I don't think you ever see 100% perfect things. And I think the more technology is brought into it, the more people will see no card ever printed is 100% perfect. Like even with these tops cards, if you're going through this tag grading, I would bet that it's almost impossible, if not completely impossible, to have 1,000 out of 1,000 on every single subsection, just because every card, when you the further and further you go into it, the more detail you go into it, there are going to be things that have happened, whether it's in the printing process, whether it's just the fact that someone's picked it up wrong. Something is going to have happened to that card to make it not 100% perfect. And I think Pokemon collectors, especially, or trading card collectors in general, are pretty resistant to the fact that there could be a grading company where you just say, "Oh, I can't get perfect cards from this company," because even if they get a 10, you can look into it further and go, "This is where it fell down." So I obviously fully support the idea of more and more technology in grading. As you know, I've graded some stuff. I don't have a ton of graded stuff in my collection, and the removal of ambiguity is always amazing. But I think that those are the main reasons why I think the Pokemon community is hesitant to go for it. And there are a lot of people as well, people who have, not not to beat around the bush, people with vested interests in certain grading companies will always push the line that their grading company is the best because it's been around longest, and that any new company can't compete because it doesn't have the history. So there are
And we
people.
all know, well, we all know that the vested interest part. I mean, I'm going to go further on the vested interest. I know for a fact we don't ever talk about these underlying things, but I know for a 100% fact that at CGC, that at PSA, there are people who allow large players to put cards in there in large batches and will give them higher grades because they choose to do that. You can't do that on a machine. You can't reprogram the machine. When you're looking for transparency and accountability, Pokemon collectors and anybody in the, you can call it the community, can bury their heads in the sand. That's fine. I don't own a Tesla. I don't own an electric car. I guess I own a hybrid. I wish I did, because we certainly are there yet. I just haven't got around to it yet. But it's new technology, and a billion people, or millions of people, I shouldn't say a billion,
Yeah,
own Teslas, whereas years ago, and you go back, and Ford being the company and Chrysler being the company, and they're the ones that everybody wanted, they're not as predominant anymore. So this will come in time, like anything else. It only makes sense. You have a younger generation of millennials coming through. I think you're one of those, Dan. I'm not sure. We'll have to check the birth dates and stuff.
I'm definitely a
And
millennial.
Okay, good. And you guys like technology and you understand its value. And there's just going to be a certain point when this technology is proven and it's assured that everybody's consistently being evaluated similarly, it will take off. And my only point here is really consider, if you're listening, you might want to hold off on grading some of your cards. It's getting cheaper and cheaper. The new company will not base on value. They won't charge you extra up charges. And once they do that, then whoever comes in their wake will have to abide by the same kind of rules and not rip you off because something comes back at a higher value. All of these things are beneficial, including a real valuation. I would never buy a PSA card or a CGC card without looking at the card in my own mind, detailed as possible, to ensure that that was a valid grade. And again, it's not being done by machines; it's being done by someone. I've talked to him. I'm going to say it again. I've had interviews because I went through an entire process in trying to evaluate the possibilities of doing this myself. And the amount of time a card is in a grader's hand is somewhere typically about 30 seconds. And it's under a light, it's in their hands, it's held by the edges, and there's a determination made. That's not good enough. That's not good enough when you start to talk about tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah,
And so I think you'll see much more specificity. I think if you bought a diamond ring 50 years ago and it was graded by the most predominant of the time, you know, rating, and it was this color clarity and this shininess clarity, it would be very different now with respect
yeah.
to you trying to determine an actual comparative value when you're using so much more of technology's capabilities. That's my
I mean,
rant.
to be honest, there's nothing to say it has to be one. It always has to be these new companies popping up. PSA back at CGC could implement more of this technology. Like I said, CGC has a lot more technology I've seen than some of the other companies, but nowhere near this level that I've seen. But if they implement that technology, then maybe they could, keep going and they could capture this new market that is really, really focused on the technology aspect and the removing ambiguity aspect. So, Tag's doing it now. I think if Tag are very heavily focused on the top stuff at the moment, they're not into the TCG stuff, that could be a huge player for them. They could be the tops people. Even if they never want to go into the TCG, they could carve out their niche in the Pokemon market as being like, okay, we are the people for tops, and that would definitely be a great thing for them. They don't need to go into the TCG market if they don't want to, and one of the TCG companies that already exist could pretty easily, I would think, just catch up to them. It doesn't necessarily, as I say, have to be someone new coming in and saying, "Oh, we're going to be the ones that do this." It could be someone who could say, "You know what? We have the pedigree, we have the history as a company. You already know us. We're now taking this next step, and we are going to be the ones to bring this technology in."
Well, and you know what's interesting about that as well? I was reading on their website last night because I was just trying to kind of prepare for this. And I didn't know, I don't know how long Tag has been around. I don't know how much other grading they've done with a less detailed orientation.
Yeah,
But what was most interesting was they were offering the ability for people to resubmit their cards and get a more detailed report. So maybe there was a time, I don't know this at all, but they had nines and tens and eights, and that's what they did. And now it's on 966 or 852. And they were saying, hey, if you like to resubmit, we'll crack the cases. We'll give you a credit for each card. So I think that that quality control, that confidence in the process, that value proposition to folks that have graded with them, those kinds of things are all things that, in theory, PSA, CGC could do as well
yeah,
if they ever get to the point where they value the clientele and the process as much as I think these newer technology companies will. So, and
yeah.
by
I
the way,
feel
this is a great time to ask for people's comments because
yeah,
you know what? There's Democrats and Republicans, and so we're going to get them on both sides of the aisle. So weigh in, let us know, give Dan a comment. He needs a comment. He and Laura don't talk much because of his situation now, not making very much money. Laura's working, I think, either 2 or 3 jobs at this point in time. They barely see each other. Dan's best friends are his dogs, and I don't blame him. So give Dan a comment so the poor guy can respond to something.
I do think if they, if PSA started doing a thing where they say, okay, now we've got this technology, what Tag has, you can resend your PSA 10s and we'll give you them on the 1,000 point breakdown scale. I don't think many people will,
No, they wouldn't exactly. You're right, and
because
that's a
they
great.
it
They
loses the
don't, they don't
idea
want to
of
know.
that. It loses the, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah,
They're like, oh, this was a
you're
PSA 10.
absolutely right.
This because even a Beckett Black Label, you can submit a Beckett Black Label, and it's not coming back 1,000 points in every category. So I don't think people would do it. I think if the company upgrades, it should be definitely something the company offers. But I think the majority of people just wouldn't actually do it because they'd rather. I mean, I know I wouldn't. I've got my PSA 10s and I'm happy with them, even though I
Yeah, and
know
I
that
love that. I love
perfect.
that. I love that you're just like an ostrich that buries his head in the sand and doesn't care. And I think that so much of life is good that way. So let's just, I may do that at some point as well. And I'm teasing. Of course,
Yeah,
Rainbow Jim, I love you. I'm teasing. I don't think we need that. We're burying our heads in the sand. I think absolutely right. Everybody that has a 10, why would they want to know any differently? I think it obviously has to be the newer folks coming through and
yeah,
understanding that other people of this generation will value accuracy more and especially when it comes to both sides, not just buying but selling.
yeah.
And then you'll get more of a trajectory. So yeah.
I feel like the people who were primarily focused in selling, I think, may go for changing to 1,000 point scale a lot more, because if they get a very strong result back, it could end up with I mean, you've seen the gaps between some prices of PSA 9s and PSA 10s. I mean, a gap between a 10. I mean, I guess we've seen gaps in 10s as to eye appeal of the card when you look at it and say, people say strong 10 or weak 10. If you had like a broken down scale of, this is a 951, this is a 970, if you're all about selling and maximizing profit, there is definitely extra money to be made there if that's the thing they started doing. I just think private collectors who've already got their graded stuff for their collection, I think would end up just never submitting it back in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
Good discussion on grading. I know there's a lot of debate. I know even you had a comment a few weeks back about, I can't believe Dave's got the pre-release Raichu card. and it's not even graded somewhere,
Yeah,
sitting in a binder. And that goes to me knowing specifically certain individuals in this hobby. They'll know who I'm talking about when they listen, who are
I know
jealous
the
of certain
listeners.
things that I have, and basically would never allow me to authenticate that card just because it's not to their interest. And I've been told that specifically by folks at the grading card company. So eventually, I'll find someone who's objective, not subjective, and we'll take care of it, and then I'll be able to really display it for the rest of you like I would like to.
Yeah,
I don't believe I learned early in my financial advisory career. Don't compete with folks. Enjoy what you have. Enjoy your collections, like I enjoy mine. I think they're all special. I think we all look at it from our own perspectives, and I don't think we should be jealous or competitive. I think there's room in this wonderful hobby for us to all do what makes us each individually happy. And I don't think we should ever have someone stand in our way, specifically when they have certain vested interests to of their own. So we should
yeah.
be supportive. I love that part of the community, um, and um, and that's what I've got to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people always said, it was money that ruined the Pokemon community and why it doesn't feel like a community anymore. It wasn't. It was egos.
Yeah,
Money was
you know what?
fine.
I think that's very well stated. Very well stated. So, all right, let's move on. I'm
I
going to
was
move
say,
on to the fact,
I
huh?
I jumped on the tag website to try and see how long they'd been grading, and just ended up down a rabbit hole of looking at graded Disney cards. So I have no idea how long they've been going for because I've just been looking at 100th anniversary Disney cards on their website. But I'll stop that now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see where that takes us. We'll talk more about it as they develop, and I have more to
Yeah,
say about specific cards. But the Chrome thing was an interesting, enlightening thing for me. So, all right, you and I are part of a Facebook group. I have no idea what it's called. Errors, miscuts, misprints. Who
yeah.
even knows? Hollow bleeds. What's it called?
Gotta misprint them all. I think is the name of the group. It's like Pokemon TCG. Gotta misprint them all. I think is the name of the actual group.
All right, so I don't get on there all that often, but occasionally when I do, something pops up, and if my timing is good, then I'll see something, which is how I actually picked up that expedition blank filler water energy card that we spoke
Yeah,
about in the last episode. Well, this week I happened to get on there and all of a sudden see someone who said that he picked up a first edition base set Machamp. I think that they're all first edition from what we understand, but you'll
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, the
Um,
only Machamps without first edition are in the trainer deck A's.
okay,
If
yes,
you that's the only time Machamp doesn't have a first edition stamp. But you can get shadowless and shadowed first edition Machamp. So the only way to tell if it's like actually from the first print run is still by looking at the shadow.
okay. Which, by the way, when everybody says that to me, Dan, I cannot tell the shadow. It makes no sense at all. So, do I, if I then transition from the shadows to the copyright dates at the bottom, does that
Yeah,
lead me to the same conclusion?
yeah. So if you look at the copyright dates on the bottom of base set, it will have the number 99 twice in shadowless. So the unlimited ones say, what is it, 95, 96, 98, Nintendo creatures, etc., and then copyright 1999 Wizards at the end. But the shadowless ones have an extra 99 earlier on.
All right. And Dan, this takes us all back to me being completely unknowledgeable. So thank you, because whenever anybody says, look at the shadow to me, I completely shake my head and I say, you're stupid to even say that to me because I'm stupid enough to not know what you're saying. Thank you. So look at your copyright dates, folks, for all those people that would find themselves in the same boat as mine. Anyways, we go out there, and all of a sudden, I see this sort of funky card that's really interesting to me, and it's that card, but it has a different colored outside border, which I know you'll be showing is not
Yeah,
yellowish; it's more of a goldish tone. Would that be accurate in the way I would describe
yeah,
it?
it looks a lot closer to gold.
And the only other border I've seen like that is on a card that came out of like which I have, and a lot of people have, which is what and came out of what?
It's a Meowth from the Jungle set, and it came out of Fruit Roll Ups. It was a promotion of
Okay,
Fruit Roll Ups. You bought a box, and it was in there. I will say that Meowth has a much more vibrant or a much more gold border. Like the Machamp that we're looking at on screen now isn't quite as gold. This is more, it's more between the yellow and the gold. The Meowth has like a really strong gold border.
okay. And of course, you and I being involved in this hobby for so long, it's sort of shocking to me that some of these things I'm not aware of. And so right away, there was a discussion going on. I think there was like 180 comments or something in
Yeah.
that thread of people saying it's not real or it is real. It's like the Meowth. But then there were auctions where it did come out in something, and then they've got links to some of those. So I felt, from my perspective, and I know you'll talk about this as well, that it seemed to be legitimate.
Yeah.
And so before I go into the actual process by which I acquired it, which is really interesting, talk about its legitimacy from what you saw and your previous knowledge or lack thereof of this specific card.
Yeah, so looking into it, I hadn't seen the card before. It was obvious from out the gate that there wasn't some sort of mass release for this card. It wasn't a promo in the way that the Meowth was. Otherwise, there's no way that I just would never have seen one. But looking into it, obviously, they showed the links to the auctions. There had been copies graded before, and from the way people talked, it seemed like what it was that it was intended to just be a regular card, but there was something happened in the printing process that made the border darker. And for me, it fell into the same category as like with base set. You can get what are called grey stamps, which are when the first edition stamp looks grey instead of black because during the stamping process, not enough ink went down, something happened, it makes it look really faded. And for me, it fell into a similar category to that, where it was something that happened during the printing process, created this unintentional variant. And because of the fact that it's Machamp, it potentially means that Machamp is the only one that this appears on regularly. I know some people in the comments said they'd seen a couple of other cards. I don't know if anyone ever actually posted pictures of other cards with the same border error. But Machamp, because it only appeared in the two-player starter deck, it never appeared in booster packs. Machamps were always printed on the sheets on their own, so it would be a sheet just full of Machamps. So if there's one of these, it means there's at least 120, basically, because you would expect something like this to affect a whole sheet.
Yeah, and so the repetitive nature of that, or the fact that multiple exist, is what interests me. I'm not
Yeah,
looking for a single printing color error situation because that's not what I look for. I look for repetitive. But there were also people, and there was more than one in that thread, and at least one of those folks is fairly well known in the hobby, who claimed that they had a sealed one. Now, I don't know. Again, we didn't see pictures,
yeah.
but the notion of a sealed one, might it change your thinking on any of this, or is that no different than the fact that it's just like those Machamps that came sealed, but just could have been on one of those sheets that you might be talking about?
Yeah, it wouldn't change my opinion because every Machamp came sealed just in plastic. It
Okay,
didn't have any sort of insert or anything, but the way that they were packaged in the starter kits, the Machamp was in its own sealed plastic wrap inside the box. So every Machamp, again, other than the Trainer Deck A1, was packaged in that way and it was sealed. So if someone has a sealed one, it wouldn't change how I thought about it.
okay, all right. So does it surprise you? I mean, you say so nonchalantly, like, yeah, I didn't really know about this card before. But Dan, how much stuff do you not really know about when it comes down to it? It surprises me that you didn't really know about this card before. And I don't want to berate you for that, especially not on the air. But I do want to ask you, Dan, does that surprise you that there's a card like that that you didn't really know about?
It surprises me a little. It's not as surprising as I think it was. Even up to probably about 5 years ago, I hadn't realized the defending error in the B drill from base set. You can get the dot, the period in between the D and the E on some copies of B drill in base set. That one I was way more surprised I didn't know about. This one, because it is kind of a color error, it isn't as surprising to me because it's not something that I would be chasing really personally for my own collection. It doesn't really fit into what I go after, what I like the most. Um, so when you get different cards, cards can look different. You can get two cards from a booster pack from the same booster packs from the same box. You get the same card, and there can be slight color variations just due to the printing process. They're never going to be exactly the same. So that kind of thing, I've never really like looked into or strongly gone down the rabbit hole of that. And if I had, I think I would have come across this card a lot earlier. But it just was the fact that I wasn't in the right place. I wasn't in the groups when they popped up. The fact that the community is so much bigger now than it was 10 years ago. If a few people are talking about this card, I might not see it in the way that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I definitely would have seen a discussion about it if anyone was talking about it. So it surprised me a little that I didn't know about it. I would be very, very surprised if there was any sort of card with an official release, any sort of English card where it was like, okay, this had an official release. We know what this was. They intended this to come out as a variant. And I didn't know about that. I would be very, very shocked at that. This kind of error, I'm not as surprised at. I'm a little surprised, but not totally.
Okay. All right, Dan. If I'm just going to put this out there, as a friend, as a buddy, as someone that's worked with you for many years, if Laura cheats on you, bud, you are never going to know. So hang on to that with for dear life. All right.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. All right, Dan. Let me move on, and let me talk about how I acquired this card, because
Yeah.
this is this hobby now. This is this community now. So the guy puts it out there. I happen to see the thread. I private message him, whatever, and say, you know what, I'm interested. Talk to me about the card, whatever. And I said, if you don't want to sell it, I don't want to pressure you to sell it. That's always my first thing. If someone wants to keep their card, I'm not there to talk them out of selling it. It's their card. But I said, if you'd like to sell it, I'd be interested. So he said, I would like to sell it for the right price. And he said, I've got an offer of $400. So I said, would $500 be a price that would seem fair to you, that would make you feel good for the card? And he said, that's a really generous price. Yes, thank you. And we were going to settle there. That was what we had talked about, and that was where it is, till all of a sudden, a couple of bigger players entered the fray. And I got to see their threads. He was showing me the threads and said, I'll give you $600 for the card, whatever. And he came back to me and he said, look, I've got $600 for the card. And I said, I don't want to get into an auction type of back and forth, because
Yeah.
we never know who's legitimate or not legitimate. But I'll tell you what, I would be glad to give you $700 for the card, if that would make you feel good and you would feel like that was enough money for you to feel solid in selling it. And he said yes. Well, as I was talking to you in the background while all that was going on, I
Yeah.
told you that I knew almost for a fact he was going to have other people continue to come at them, especially because unfortunately he would have shared my screenshots with him with those other people. And
Yeah.
some of those other people are very competitive against me. There's just this handful of folks, 3 or 4 in the industry, that are top players who do not like that I try to get cards from my collection. They feel it's a slap to themselves because they want the cards. And ironically, all of these other folks want to get those cards to resell them at some point. That's the focus, as opposed to what I've done to this point in time, which is never sold any of them. Never sold a single card that I got for my collection out again. It's been in my collection. So I waited and I waited, and he gave me his Zelle information, and I sent him the $700, and I waited, and I told you that I thought he was going to back out.
Yeah.
So 15, 20, 30 minutes later, I get a message and he goes, David, it's only business, dude. I need to, I can get $1,000 for this card. I don't want to sell it anymore, whatever. I want to sell, not sell it. I want to sell it for more. Because if he doesn't want to sell it, that's a different issue. And I said, that's fine. And I explained, this is a very young man. And I explained that you need to do whatever you need to do. If you want to cancel this sale, that's on you. But karma is a funny thing. And I do believe in it. And I do believe in your word counting for something. And I do believe there's lots of temptations in life that will take you down a funny path. And I hope you won't cancel it. I hope you'll keep your word, and continue to sell me the card. I said lots of things that I truly meant. I said, I live in Vegas. You ever want to take a trip to Vegas? Come and stay with my wife in our home. Don't pay any hotel bills, right down the strip. He goes, gosh, I think I might come to Vegas in a few months. And I said, you don't have to. That's up to you. But this is what happens when you treat people right and they treat you back right, because of relationships and things that are more important than just money. As well as I said, I'd send him some other cards just for thanking him, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Well, he came back to me and he said, "Thank you for giving me a wake up call." He goes, "I made a mistake. I was being greedy and I wasn't true to my word. And I appreciate the fact that you are who you are and the relationship part of it." And he went ahead and sent the card. And it meant a lot. And I think his life will, I mean, I know it sounds silly. I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. But I think doing those kinds of things really make for the right outcomes. And I'm going to just interject one other story now. I've never told this story before. It's relative to what happened with this gentleman. His name is Joseph Saucedo. Also, I think I don't know his last name because it might be Saucedo or Alanese, and he's in that group. I
Okay.
definitely want to shout him up. I said I'm so proud of you for sticking to your guns and not worrying about all the other people and all the other noise coming at you. But here's my story. There was a time when I'd opened up some stuff for my collection, not for my collection, for my inventory, but I'd bought it as part of previous collections, and there was some autograph cards. I don't collect autograph cards. So there was a handful. I didn't know really what they were. There were about 4 or 5 of them, and I put them out on eBay. And I thought I put them out at a reasonable price. Before I could hit the put it out there listing, new listing button, they were gone. Bam, they were bought. And I did not understand the rarity of the autographs. Well, as soon as somebody hit buy, I had people contacting me saying, "David, what were you doing? You sold that for $400. I'll give you 4,000. Just cancel the sale. I'll give you whatever." And that really takes a toll, Dan. You have to look really inside yourself, deep inside yourself, to say, "I just gave up $3,000. I gave up whatever." But I didn't cancel those sales because that's the wrong thing to do. If I made the mistake and I put them out there and someone bought them and I made them happy by that transaction, I need to stick to that. I may be the anomaly here, and I'm not trying to say I'm some, wonderful, whatever you want to say, uh, better than everybody else, holier than art thou. But that's how I've lived my life, and I think I sit where I do with little stress and a wonderful life when I don't look over my shoulder for anything, because of continuing to maintain who I am, being transparent, being accountable for my actions. I put it out there. I made an agreement. I sold the card. And that's what this gentleman, Joseph Saucedo or Joseph Alanese, did. And I was really proud of him, and I'm proud to own his card inside of my collection.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the community where people will not look at the bigger picture. I mean, you think about it. He sold your card for 700. So if someone was offering him 1,000, yeah, maybe he did lose out on 300 on this deal. But you have to think going forward. Do you want the reputation as someone who will cancel a sale after you've got the money? No, because now if he has to sell another big item in the future, he's got a reference from you, and a lot of people in the community know your name. You know, a reference from you is going to be a big deal, and you just have to really, really focus on the future with that kind of thing. It all does remind me of one story. So I'm not going to name the gentleman's name. So there's a people are at Worlds, you know, as you are every year, talking about trophy cards. Trophy cards get given out. Some go to adults, some go to children, some go to TCG players, some go to VGC players. There's one Worlds. A guy is speaking to a VGC player, someone who came third or fourth, and is attempting to buy from them the bag that they get. It's a kind of nice messenger bag that the top 32 players get, and there'll be some extra stuff in it. They're working out a trade. The trade deal is something like $5 off. And the parent then shows the number 3 trainer card to this buyer and says, "Oh, we got this as well. Is this worth the $5? Will this make up the $5 difference?" And that person says, "Oh yeah, definitely." And they take the trade. And they came onto the Facebook groups. I think it was still Verbank was going at the time. Other Facebook groups, they started bragging. They tell the story of how they got a trophy card for $5, and they then sold it, and they made a huge amount of money, but they basically became a pariah amongst other people. Like no one would deal with them going forward because they knew, oh, that was the person who ripped off, a 7-year-old VGC player by giving them $5 for a card that was worth 1,000. And you just have to, like, he's now stuck with that reputation. I think a lot of people know about it. And when he actually put that card up for auction, he did make obviously quite a lot of money, way over the $5 he paid, but it ended a lot lower than other trophy cards were at the time because a lot of the bigger players who knew the story refused to touch it. And it even very recently sold again. The same card sold to Rusty from TCA Gaming. And I was speaking to a few people because Rusty bought it without knowing the full history of that card. And then Rusty actually tried to track down the original winner just because he felt so bad about having a card in his collection where even though he'd paid a totally fair price from it from another collector and the person who did the ripping off was 3 or 4 people down this ownership chain, Rusty was actually trying to track down the original winner to give them some money so they hadn't actually been ripped off for it, give them some money to make it closer to what it was after all these years, just because he felt so bad about the fact that he owned this card with like a horrible story attached to it. I don't know if he ever managed to track down the winner. I was speaking to some people. I think we got the name of who I think it was, but I wasn't able to make contact. I don't know if he eventually did. But I guess that's just, we've spoken before on this podcast about how we both think Rusty is a huge asset to the community. He's a real stand-up guy. He's one of the best people out there. But it just goes to show the guy favored $2,000 over. I mean, you call it karma, call it whatever. He dug his own grave. He prioritized the money. He didn't prioritize.
Yeah, the greed. It's just that greed or that greed. Getting off or whatever. Yeah.
It was the I can have this now and not thinking about the future, not thinking about what could happen.
Yeah, and a deal. We always say a real deal, a real trade is a good deal or a good trade when both parties are actually happy, but that's obviously with full knowledge of what they've got in their possession. Trying to hide something from someone is a whole different issue. So that's a great story. It is I talk to so many people who start telling me they don't know what I think or feel about other players. And it's not a ton of them, but there's a handful of larger players that people start telling me stories and they'll say, you don't believe the stuff I know about these folks. And I say, you don't even have to tell me because I already know for myself. So reputation is important.
I assume you mean
I don't mean players. Yes, I mean larger.
The collecting scene, not
yeah. I don't mean people that play the game. I mean large scale sellers, collectors, podcasters, etc. Obviously, folks who, whose egos, as you said in the beginning of this thing, have gotten in the way. And they may not understand that other people know that and see that, but everybody knows that and sees that. They may not tell these folks to their face. It could be a little bit of a almost like what some people would say about a Trump thing in politics, but they support them underneath, but then below the surface they're kind of festering. So
yeah, and a lot of,
nothing against. I'm not doing politics, by the way. I'm just saying, no. Republicans, and some like him and some don't, but everybody sort of supports him even if they don't. So,
and there's always the thing with these bigger people where it's like, oh, they say, oh, I have this many people supporting me, and it's like, yeah, but those people supporting you, they're just using you for the leg up the way that you used other people.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no friendship in high end collecting anymore. If I want to speak to people, there's a couple of friends, you and a couple of others I could name who I would consider genuine friends who I've met through Pokemon who are into the higher end collecting. But now, if there's people I'm friendly with and there's people I want to have a good chat with, it's players or it's people who aren't at that higher level, who aren't interested in these super rare items, the ones who are making, stabbing each other in the back for all this kind of stuff. The lower levels of collecting, that's where the fun is, that's where the nice people are.
Well, and very well said. I will say, I know we got to finish up here pretty soon, but I do want to say one more thing. It is interesting because if I were to call Rusty and I were to say, hey, and again, I don't know Rusty that well. I just know of his kindness. If I were to call him or he were to call me, and I did that, even trying to acquire the uncut sheet collaboratively with him that went at auction and that went higher than we would ever have assumed at the 250 or whatever. But I would say, could you help me find this thing? And he would say, sure. I'll, if I find one, if I come across it, I'll let you know for sure. And
Yeah.
I would do the same kind of thing. Well, guess what? So there are people that I considered friends from the beginning who, when we would have discussions about finding something like a rare booster box or something, they would say to me, sure, David, if you want to pay me a finder's fee. So all of a sudden it went from just helping me find it, no, through nothing other than a phone call or a contact, to, yeah, I'll do the work for you if you want to pay me $500 or pay me $1,000.
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing that. I understand it. That's their prerogative. That's their business model. That's what they do. But talk about someone that really doesn't value friendships, because they're not going to have them anymore,
Yeah.
and they certainly don't have my friendship anymore. So it's just it's the greed part of this really is interesting. I will tell you, most of the stuff that I say, I try to keep it very transparent, accountable. The two tenets that I live my life by. So I'm going to also continue my little quick tangent here to say, I didn't say earlier about how many times, and I've said this before in other videos with you, how many times certain people that are at the pinnacle of this hobby with respect to followers told me those trophy cards would be worth nothing.
Yeah.
They would never be worth anything because there would never be demand for them. And at that point, I believed them. I didn't collect them to be worth anything, but they were 100% wrong. And as time went on, those same people tried to acquire those cards and sell them and do things that could make them money. So a lot of folks believe this stuff, but the reason I brought that story up is because the Topps Chrome stuff, for the folks that are listening, and it might have got all the way to the end of this, go out and look for some of it. Go look for some of it. I'm going to tell you guys from an investment standpoint, I was on the system this past week. What really stood out to me, I didn't see great values in technos, but I did see in the Topps Sparkle Chromes. Go out and do a Google search for Topps Sparkle Chromes, put in PSA 9s, and there are people out there right now that are selling those cards for about $200 each. They should be $400, $500, $600 right now. If you want to tuck something away for the longer time, and again, I'm not advising you as an investment advisor, as my real profession in the investment markets like stocks, bonds, etc. So take it with a grain of salt. It's just my opinion, but I think you'll be very well rewarded down the road for those kinds of deals and bargains you might see in graded cards, in sparkles and technos that seem underpriced to the market if you can find them. And I think I'll be right on this, as opposed to someone who looks at it after the fact. I think hopefully you can get a little ahead of it and maybe pick up some things that you both enjoy and make some money on down the road.
It's a good one to look at. I think no, there are not that many people looking at Topps Chrome. I know there are a few people who are very very heavily into it, but I think it is still a very small community of people.
And the population of cards and boxes, like we said before, they're just not
Yeah,
out there.
it's
You
very
can
very
still find a Series One box or a base, unlimited edition. They're still out there over and over and over again.
yeah.
So, all right, I'm done with my stuff for today. I had something else we're going to talk about, but I want to keep it for next
The other
broadcast.
card. All right.
Yes, yeah, because I think that it'll have its own story behind it, and maybe during that time we'll also talk about. I think I do want to tell the story next time of my acquisition of this year's world's #1
Yeah.
trophy
It's
card,
a,
just because the travel the
yeah.
travel
It's a
that
funny
card
story.
had to do is unbelievable. So
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll get some more stuff in between now and
Yeah.
then. But I always say at the end before you close, hey guys, thank you so much for watching, taking the time. My wife can't watch these. I say, look, honey, Mother's Day, I'm sorry for everything I've done. You're a wonderful mother. Do me a huge favor. Would you just watch a video or two of what I've done with Dan? Because it's going to help his hours. An hour is an hour. She goes, yes, I will, honey. When we're dealing with each other in a kind way, we call each other honey. And so then she sits down and she gets off and she goes, David, it was so long. I will never watch another one of these ever. It's too long. I can't do it. It's boring. And I'm like, honey, you can't even say that. You're supposed to support me, put me up on a pedestal, whatever. And she said that will never happen. So she's not into Pokemon. I'm going to give her a little leeway, but for the rest of you, if you get through these things, if you like them, if you like the craziness and the stories and some of the acquisition stuff and some of our opinions, if you hate it all, keep watching. Go back and watch a few. Tell a friend, tell a parent, tell a sibling, tell a loved one to see if they're going to be someone that likes your similar interests, so that you'll know if you want to stay with them for a while. And just keep and hit that subscribe or like button. I don't have it on here. It's for Dan. It's just for our good friend Dan.
Maybe that's how we've both managed to avoid having these huge egos that these other people have, is that we both have wives who are willing to tell us how terrible we are at any given opportunity.
All the time. And you know what's sad about that is your wife also will tell me how bad I am at everything as well. So it's a nice thing. It's a nice shared relationship.
It is. That's what you need. Is you need someone behind you to just go, no, calm down. Don't think of yourself this highly. That's all you need. You just need one person to bring you back down to earth, and then you won't get this massive ego and ruin all your friendships.
Yeah. So guys out there, all you single guys, if you don't want that, never get married.
There we go. We've said a lot of stuff in this podcast without saying a lot of stuff in this podcast, I feel. This episode. Yep, I think that is going to be it for today. Like Dave has teased a nice little card there. I'm looking at a picture of a card in front of me that he sent me, which we'll talk about next week, which is going to be a nice one, so make sure to come back for that. But that's it. That's another week over. Be sure to leave those comments. We will speak to you again very soon. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
I would like to say a huge thank you to everyone who chooses to support me on Patreon. If you'd like to get involved, help support the channel, and see some behind-the-scenes content, click on the link in the description. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching. Check out some more videos right here.
And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome Pokemon content from DJ Gigabyte.
Gotta catch 'em all!